Lyra Ashcroft had 3 days to pack her life into a single trunk. She did not cry when her brothers told her. She did not argue when the elders laid out the terms. She simply stood in the middle of the room, nodded once, and walked to the hillside behind her family home, the place where she had watched the moon rise every night since she was a little girl. She sat there for a long time, looking at the sky, wondering if the moon goddess was watching. The sky gave nothing back. Lyra took that as her answer. Her father was dying. Her pack was exhausted. 6 years of conflict had taken almost everything from the Ashcroft wolves: food, land, young lives that should have had longer stories. And now there was a way to end it. One way, one price. She would marry the Alpha King. Darian Voss was not a man that people described warmly. He was 31, broad across the shoulders, and built from years of hard decisions. He had ruled the Iron Veil Pack since he was 23, and in that time, he had turned a fractured territory into one of the most powerful packs in the region. He was respected everywhere. He was loved almost nowhere. That did not trouble him. He had stopped believing in the softer things a long time ago, on the night his fated mate looked him in the eyes at 17 and chose someone else. After that, he decided that strategy was more reliable than hope, and he had lived by that ever since. When his counsel brought him the marriage proposal, he listened to every word without expression. Then he nodded, told his beta Kale to prepare the guest wing, and went back to reviewing the border reports. He did not ask Lyra's name until the morning of the ceremony. The bonding ceremony was short. Neither of them had asked for flowers or music, and neither received them. They stood beneath the open sky while the elder spoke the old words, and the gathered wolves watched in near silence. Lyra kept her eyes forward. Darian kept his expression flat. When the elder instructed them to press their palms together for the bonding mark, both of them did it without hesitation, 2 people completing a task. Then something happened that was not in the plan. The moment their hands touched, a warmth moved through Lyra's chest. Not pain, not shock. Something quieter and far more unsettling, like a candle being lit in a room that had been dark for so long. She had forgotten there was a candle there. She kept her face still. Across from her, Darian's jaw tightened by the smallest amount. His beta, standing nearby, noticed. He said nothing. That night, Darian showed Lyra to her wing, told her the household staff would answer any need, and wished her a formal good evening. The door closed. Lyra stood alone in a large, unfamiliar room, unpacked her trunk slowly, and placed a small carved wolf figurine on the windowsill, the only thing from home she had brought. She looked at it for a moment. Then she went to sleep, because tomorrow would come regardless of how she felt about it. The first 2 weeks were a careful distance. Darian was busy, and genuinely so. There were trade agreements to finalize, a boundary dispute to mediate, and ongoing tension at the southern edge of the territory that required his attention every morning. Lyra appeared at the formal dinner table each evening, spoke when spoken to, and excused herself without drawing attention. The household staff treated her politely. The pack wolves watched her with curiosity that they disguised as indifference. She did not wait for an invitation to make herself useful. By the end of the first week, she had learned every name in the household, from the head cook, a wide woman named Bess who had been feeding the stronghold for 20 years, to the youngest kitchen boy, a 10-year-old named Pip, who had a habit of hiding bread rolls in his apron. She learned these things not by asking questions that felt like interviews, but by being present, by listening without urgency, by making people feel that she had all the time in the world for whatever they wanted to say. In the second week, she visited the pack's healing den without being asked. She spent 3 days there, observing quietly, asking small questions about the routine. Then, without announcement, she reorganized the care schedule in a way that cut waiting times in half and gave the healers 2 rest periods each day instead of 1. She left a single written note on the head healer's table explaining the changes. She did not sign it with any title. Kale told Darian about it over morning reports. Darian listened. He said nothing. But he began, without meaning to notice where Lyra was in a room. The moment that changed something, though neither of them could have named exactly what, came in the 3rd week, when a young girl named Mara lost her mother to a sudden illness. Mara was 12 and had no father. The loss hit her so completely that she stopped speaking, stopped eating, and sat in her small room staring at the wall, while the pack healers exchanged worried looks and uncertain suggestions. Darian was informed. He stood outside the girl's door for a moment, then walked away. He was not a man who knew what to do with grief that had no solution. He had learned, over many years, that entering situations he could not fix only made them worse. Lyra heard about Mara from Bess and went to her that same evening. She did not bring food, advice, or carefully prepared words. She brought herself. She sat on the floor beside the girl's bed and said, simply, that she did not have to talk. Mara did not talk. But after an hour, Lyra said one thing: "You do not have to be okay right now. You only have to be here." Mara looked at her for the first time, and that was enough for one night. By the following evening, Mara ate half a bowl of soup. Kale mentioned it to Darian the next morning, between a shipping report and a staffing update, as if it were a minor thing. Darian did not respond. That night, he stood outside the door of Lyra's wing for a long moment, one hand raised as if to knock. Then he lowered it and walked back down the hall. The first real conversation happened by accident. Lyra could not sleep. She often could not, in the first weeks. And she went to the Stronghold's library because she had noticed, in passing, that it had a large eastern window and good moonlight. She had been reading for perhaps an hour when Darian came in. He stopped when he saw her. She looked up, nodded once, and returned to her book. He almost left. Something kept him. Perhaps it was the fact that she asked nothing of him. No conversation, no performance of warmth. She simply shared the room. He sat across from her with a stack of ledgers and worked in silence. After about an hour, Lyra said, without looking up, "You rub your left hand when something is troubling you, your ring finger specifically." Darian stopped. He looked down. He had not realized he was doing it. "Old habit," she said, turning a page. "Or old pain." He said nothing, but he came back to the library the following night, and the night after. It became the one quiet ritual of both their lives. This shared room, this borrowed silence. Words began to enter it gradually, the way light enters slowly through a curtain that someone has opened by only an inch. He asked what she was reading. She told him about the old Ashcroft healing texts she had brought with her, record books of remedies and emotional histories that her grandmother had kept. He told her, unexpectedly, that his own grandmother had been a healer, something he had not thought about in years. The conversation ended there, but it had started something. One night she asked him about the old war map he kept pinned above the library's west shelf, the one showing the roots of every conflict between their packs over the past decade. "The war is over," she said. "Why is the map still there?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Because I don't trust over." She looked at him across the room. "That sounds like a very lonely way to live." He closed his ledger and left. But her words followed him for days, into meetings and mealtimes and the quiet hours before sleep, and he could not quite get rid of them, which told him more than he was ready to admit. The outside threat arrived in the form of Alpha Soren of the Greymarch pack, a man who wore courtesy like a costume. He had once proposed a political alliance to Darian that included his own family connection, and Darian had declined without ceremony. Soren had not forgotten. When he heard about Lyra, a keeper, from a smaller and now dissolved pack, installed as the Ironvale Queen, he arrived for a visit that was really a test. At the formal dinner, between the second and third course, Soren made a remark to Lyra. It was smooth and quiet and dressed as a compliment, but every wolf at the table knew what it was, an attempt to show that she did not belong there, that she was soft, that the Alpha King had weakened himself with a peace bride from a weaker line. The table went still. Lyra set down her cup. She looked at Soren with the same steady attention she gave everyone, healers, kitchen boys, grieving children, and said, "I have sat with wolves in the last hours of their lives and heard what they could not say to anyone else. I know what a man looks like when the only thing holding him together is the idea that other people are beneath him." She paused. "You should sit down, Alpha." Soren sat down. No one at the table spoke for a moment. Then Bess, from the far end, reached for the breadbasket, and the dinner continued. Darian said nothing for the rest of the meal, but when Lyra glanced at him once, she saw something behind his eyes that had not been there before, something that looked almost like wonder. The night of the silver convergence came without warning, the way the most important moments often do. It was a lunar event that occurred once in a generation, when the moon aligned directly above the old bonding stone at the center of the stronghold courtyard, filling it with a light so clear and still that it looked less like moonlight and more like something deliberate. The pack elders knew the name for it. Most of the younger wolves had only heard stories. Lyra went to the courtyard because she could not sleep, and the light was pulling her in a way she did not have words for. Darian went because something woke him at midnight, and the pull toward the open air was stronger than the pull toward the ledgers on his desk. They arrived at the bonding stone within moments of each other and stopped, surprised. Then the warmth from their first touch returned. But this time it did not flicker. It opened, wide and unhurried and completely certain. And in the space of one breath, Lyra understood what had been true all along. Not a political match made by dying men. Not a contract sealed with signatures. Something older than all of it, chosen before either of them existed, simply waiting for them to be still enough to feel it. She felt herself seen, not for her gift, or her bloodline, or her usefulness, but entirely, and specifically, as herself. It was the most unfamiliar thing she had ever experienced. Her eyes filled, and she let them. Darian felt it half a breath behind her, and every wall he had built since he was 17, the ones constructed from rejection and pride, and the decision to never again trust something he could not control, softened all at once. Not collapsed, softened, the way that snow does when the temperature shifts by only a single degree, imperceptibly, and then suddenly everything is different. He looked at her. In the silver light, with her eyes bright and her expression open, she looked nothing like a treaty. She looked like the answer to a question he had stopped asking. "I don't know how to do this," he said. It was the truest thing he had said in years. Lyra looked back at him. "I know. I'll stay while you learn." What followed was not perfect. Darian had built his patterns over too many years to shed them in a season. There were mornings he withdrew into silence, and evenings he sat across from her at dinner, and could not find a single word. There were moments Lyra had to choose, quietly and deliberately, to stay, not because she was required to, but because she believed that people who are healing deserve the steadiness of someone who does not leave the moment things get difficult. She had always been a keeper. She understood that healing is not a straight line. It doubles back, gets lost, starts again. What changed the pack was not a ceremony or a speech. It was the slow accumulation of visible things. The Alpha King, pausing a council meeting to ask his mate what she thought about a dispute near the healing den. Lyra standing beside Darian at the eastern boundary, not decorative, but genuinely consulted, her quiet assessments becoming something the senior wolves sought out. The growing understanding among the Iron Veil wolves that their new queen was not soft. She was strong in a direction they had not been taught to recognize. Lyra wrote to her father in his final days. She told him everything honestly, that she had been afraid, that the life she had been handed was nothing she would have chosen, and that she would not trade it now for the world. He died 4 days later, at peace, holding the letter. At the next full moon, Darian brought his entire pack to the bonding stone. He stood in front of every wolf he governed, took Lyra's hand, and said something he had never prepared a speech for, something unpolished and real, about what it had cost him to spend 14 years believing that fate was a story told to people who were not paying attention, and what it meant to discover, in a woman who had been handed to him like a political solution, that he had been wrong about almost everything that mattered. The pack was quiet when he finished. Then, one by one, they lowered their heads, not in submission, but in the old gesture of respect between wolves who recognized something true. They had come to the bonding stone as two people sealed together by other people's decisions. They left it as something no war and no treaty had ever produced between their packs. Proof that the moon goddess does not always announce what she is doing, but she very rarely gets it wrong.